Episode 17 of the Consistency Podcast is here. My name is Stephen Gloucester with instant reaction to the January 14th tweet from Kirk Minihane stating that Andrew Augustus is no longer the co-producer of the Kirk Minihane Show. This was a decision that was looming, and we were basically hinted to the fact that Kirk was going to make this decision on Friday when he said that he reached out to Justin to see if he would be able to produce this week. So it was something that was bound to happen and, put Gus out of his misery finally in terms of being in a position that just wasn't the right fit for him. And from a personal level, this is definitely tough, and a lot of us feel bad for Gus. Nobody wants to hear the news that they're no longer a part of a show that they really enjoy and that was a dream job. And Gus, as I've stated many times, is a great person behind the scenes. Pre and post show, Gus was very enjoyable to talk to. He's funny. He's down to earth. He has a good mannerism to him. And, maybe there was an occasional text between me and him that, I found enjoyable. So I know this is going to be a tough week or two for him. He's got to reach out to friends and family to let them know what's going on. He has to try to get back on his feet quickly and land something. So from a person-to-person standpoint, this is brutal. Nobody wants to hear that news. And I really hope that Gus can find something going forward that he truly enjoys and can make him happy on a day-to-day basis, because he definitely deserves that. And you got to think that this may also be a relief to him in a way, because he was catching a lot of heat from a lot of people for many weeks. A lot of people are upset with him, and, nobody wants to, be a victim or, have to hear that type of stuff all the time. I mean, it has to be frustrating, and he didn't show it at all on the show. The kid was Teflon. I mean, he took a verbal beating from Kirk this past week, and he had people on the show openly saying, when we are the new producers, this is what we plan to do in Montante and Mick. And, you have an option to have Justin come in and produce. I mean, who wants to sit there and hear that stuff? So you had to feel bad from the kid from a personal level. And I think we all wish him well. And we know, like, in the next month or two, there's going to be the Gus comeback tour like Steve Robinson and Dave Cullinane had, where people are going to love having him back in the third chair at live events. So in the long run, I think this is going to work out for Gus. I think this is something that is going to be looked upon differently once he's away from KMS for a while. But for right now, it was the best business decision that Kirk could make. Everybody was struggling, in studio, outside of the studio, being fans. And I could tell that, Kirk really struggled with this decision. He really had to internalize what was going on with his show. And, I don't think he was very quick to make this decision because, one, he doesn't like to do these things, which, firing isn't something that any boss finds a pleasure in or is very easy for them. But with Kirk being such a great guy, it's tougher. And, he did say that if Gus was an asshole or if he was a boob like Andy Mayo, it would be easier to fire Gus, but he struggled with it. So, you also felt bad for Kirk in the situation, but having the Band-Aid ripped off is something that needed to happen for the betterment of the show. And over the past 3 months, listening to Gus was a struggle, and it reminded me a lot of the Elegant Elliot Offen era from the old Howard Stern show. Elliot was absolutely the worst person on that show. It was always about Elliot. Always that vocabulary, the yelling, the right stuff that just drove people nuts. He wore a dress many times in studio, and he just was a bombastic person that just made you frustrated to no end when he was on. But I think Howard finally realized that when he banned him from the studio, and he was never welcomed back on the show, and now he's never talked about with Howard at all. And I just felt like we were at that point with Gus, because from day one, it was always about Gus. How his house looked like, what he did for errands, his bowling league. He wore a dress to bowling. All the Twitter stuff was always about Gus, what he's doing behind the scenes in his personal life, but it never seemed like it was about the show. And anytime he talked about the show, it was always empty promises, always lies. Things he said he was going to do, he never did. And when he was on the show, he wasn't prepared. He seemed to be very lazy, and he just didn't take this job as serious as he said he was. And he had said that this was his last hurrah. This was the job that he wanted because it was a passion of his. And, if he failed at this job, he was never going to have another producing job. And he never really showed that until the end, when he was on that pity party saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But it's like, where was that intensity? Where was that emotion when he first got the job? And it just seemed like it was more of Gussie bullshit. And, nobody wanted to hear it anymore. Everybody grew tired of it. And as I've mentioned before, if you lie constantly on your job, if you break your promises, if you don't do your work, you get fired from 99.9% of all professions. And it's just a part of life, and something that, you have to deal with when you're not performing to the level of what Kirk is expecting. And a lot of us could see through it from day one. You knew that this guy was an empty suit. He was a fugazi. He had no intention of doing more than the bare minimum. And unfortunately, he just couldn't even do the bare minimum correct. He was no good on social media, didn't really post a lot. He couldn't really cut clips well. He was unable to listen back to stuff in preparation for the show. And his introductions to a lot of his stories just didn't make any sense. Like, he gave away the punchline before the joke most of the time. And you could tell that Kirk was frustrated, and he had reached his limit on how much he could take. And he does listen back to the fans. He does listen back to the comments. Those things drive him nuts, even though he may not openly say that on the show. So I think everybody reached that boiling point of like, look, the show is being sabotaged by Gus and his employment. And it was getting ignorant that he was there when he just didn't belong there. It just wasn't a good fit. And, now it's time to move on. And, nobody gets any satisfaction from this. Like, it's not something that Kirk enjoys, and anybody who has a heart, doesn't want to see Gus have to look for new employment and try to get back on his feet quickly. But when it comes to business, when it comes to the show, this is something that needed to be done. And I really hope, again, that he can land on his feet quickly, because he is a good guy. But when it came to the show, Gus just wasn't a good fit. So I do wish him well. I hope it works out for him. But this is something that had to be done. And now we get to look forward to what's in store for 2024. I mean, it would be nice to get a lot more Barstool people on, over the past 2 weeks because, Gus has been so ignorant. We haven't had much Barstool interaction. Jeff D. Lowe on occasion, but not a lot of the other guys. We don't know a lot about what's coming up in 2024. We know there's a live show. We know he's going to Subway, but we don't know what else Kirk has in store because it's just been a stalemate over the past couple of weeks. So hopefully starting, this upcoming week after the Gussie fallout, we can, get back to the business at hand and see what Kirk is going to do with the producers. I know he's still not 100% happy with Coleman, but it seems like, Coleman's going to be back on track and, be able to, reacquaint himself with the show again and put out good material going forward, especially because he doesn't have to spend half of his time, making up for Gus's deficiencies or, being a lawyer for Gus. Maybe now Coleman can be a little bit more creative and energetic when it comes to putting out good material for the show. And we'll see what happens with the co-producer. It seems like the job is for the M&M boys, Montante and Mick. I think that would be a great idea to start off with. I don't know if it has any legs or if it's going to really take off. But I think we're all willing to give a shot at this point because we just had 3 months of misery with Gussie bullshit. So let's see what happens coming up. Again, from a personal level, I wish Gus well. But from a show perspective, arrivederci, Gus.